Hello, my name is Mary Hart. I'm an artist and I have a studio space in Gates Block. I also live in downtown Lowell, so I'm a downtown Lowell citizen. I teach art at Middlesex Community College. I teach in the art department. I teach a class called graphic design. And the work that I do in my studio reflects my training as a graphic designer and illustrator. So illustrators are sometimes painters, and there's sometimes people who do drawings, and sometimes people who do prints, or people who work digitally. I'm very political, and so oftentimes my inspiration comes from events that are going on. So sometimes my art is a response to things that are going on in the world. Other times I like to, because illustrators work with clients, sometimes I like to have a challenge and say, well, do a piece of art about a particular subject or an art that's related to a topic. So it's fun to do work that way. I started out doing lettering art, which is calligraphy, and a few of my pieces have calligraphy in them. So this is a pretty good cross section of what I do. I like to play around with paint, so I like to do kind of scribbly paintings. I like to work with letters, so sometimes I'll do a painting and do lettering on top of the painting. Collage is sort of fun, so I make monsters sometimes with collage and cut paper. I've done some printmaking, so this is a print on painted paper. So I was able to do the cut paper on a really big scale. Here's one with letters in too. I don't always use letters. This is a quote from the American poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And it's not easy to read, but if you try really hard, you can read it. And sometimes I always take a sketchbook when we're on vacation. Sometimes I get ideas. So here's two things I did on vacation. One was on vacation in Santa Fe, and one was when I was on vacation in Cape Cod, and there was a fox that was walking around at night making horrible screaming noises. And I thought it was a chupacabra, which is a Puerto Rican monster. So being in an artist studio is like being in somebody's attic. It's sort of the accumulation of things that I find interesting. So my studio has a lot of my own artwork. Not that I find my own artwork that interesting, but just I'm creating it, so it's surrounding me. And sometimes I work on a piece for a while and then I leave it and then I come back and work on it later. So, but I also collect things that I find when I travel, and I save them and I look at them, and sometimes they spark some work. So in addition to having artwork in the studio, I have things from places, you know, a piece of beach, a beach driftwood, and a mask from Puerto Rico, or an evil eye charm from Greece. Places that either I've gone or somebody I love has gone and brought back for me. And when I look at the things in the room, it makes me feel like creating things. So it's a place where not only do I have my artwork and my things, but I also have my supplies. And if you work in a variety of media, as I do, there's a lot of things that you need. So I have a big collection of brushes. I have a big collection of paints in my shelves. I buy paper and canvases, so I usually have some stacked up in case I get inspired and I want to start something. And then I have projects that are, well, maybe they're not finished yet, maybe they'll never be finished, but I have them in varying stages of completion. So I'll take some pictures and you can look at some of the ones that aren't finished yet, just because it kind of gives you a little insight into how an artist's mind might work. So that's pretty much it. I mean, things that are in process, things that are finished and waiting to go out, things that have been on exhibit and I've brought them back and I don't know if I'm going to paint them over or or do something else with them or give them away or sell them. My mom was an artist, and I think the tendency ran in the family. So I was lucky in that from an early age, my parents would take me for art lessons on Saturdays, so extra from school. And I had teachers who encouraged me at school. I had a really influential teacher in high school, and I was really happy to try different new things in high school that I'd never tried before, like screen printing and using different kinds of paint and techniques. I had a very good teacher, and that inspired me to go to college for art. So I went to college for art in Pittsburgh. And after I went to college for art, I worked as a designer. So my background is as graphic design and illustrator, so that's the type of work I do. But I've always been very interested in letters, letter forms and lettering, so my specialty was doing the kind of lettering, hand lettering you would see on packages and things like that. So I've been teaching art for the past 20 years, so I didn't start out as an art teacher. I came to it after I had a design career. And I teach at the community college, which I like a lot. I have students here in Lowell and also in Bedford. So that's kind of divide my time between teaching. And I think if you're a good teacher and you're teaching something like an art, creative arts, it's helpful if you are practicing the creative art yourself, not just teaching it, but actually doing it. So I try to keep busy doing art. I was teaching in Bedford, and my boss asked me if I wanted to teach in Lowell, and I had never been to Lowell. And I said, well, I don't know, it's a little bit further away, but I said, okay. So I took a class. I took one of the classes she offered me in Lowell. When you're an adjunct professor, you usually take them when they're offered, because you don't know if they'll get offered again. So I came up to Lowell, and while I was here, I started to meet some artists. In between my classes, I'd go to lunch, and I had a couple of friends who lived up here. And I realized just how much art activity was going on in Lowell, and it started to be really attractive. We lived in Winchester, which is a very nice suburb of Boston, but not especially artful. And the more I did around Lowell, the more interesting it looked. So a big reason for moving here was because of the arts and the artists who are here. And I've met many people who do many interesting things. I love being in a community where there's a lot of artists around. I think Lowell could do more to be art friendly, and we could have more art representation in the city. I think that's something to work for. I'm very interested in community art work. So right now I scheduled art shows at 2 restaurants in town. So I try to get artists' work up on the walls in the restaurant so people can see them. I've organized shows places. I was active in downtown Lowell First Thursdays, all of which I think it's nice for artists to be in their studio working, but I think it's also really important and good for art to be on visible display. And in a town like Lowell, where there's 500 artists or more who live here and work here, it seems like there should be more art that you come across just walking around, because unfortunately many people will not cross the street to go into an art gallery. But that doesn't mean they don't like art. It means that they don't feel like the gallery is a place where they're welcome or a place where they would be comfortable. So if you are interested in art, or if you have a child that's interested in art, I want to encourage you, because art is something that all human beings do. Making art is a human endeavor. And unfortunately, at some point in our lives, someone tells us that we're not really an artist, or they can't be an artist. So not everybody thinks they could be artistic and do art, but actually art is a very healthy activity. It doesn't have calories. It exercises your brain. It gets you to meet interesting people. So I recommend art, even if you don't want to make a profession of it. I think children especially should be encouraged to explore and be creative, because you take the kind of creative problem solving you do in making artworks into the larger world and use that kind of creative problem solving in other areas too. it's not just to make art, but to figure out how things fit together and how things work. So it's all good.